So now with a pure mouth I piously invoke Athena, lady of this land, to come to my aid. You are listening to the Hamia podcast, the renaissance of Western spirituality, paganism and animism. We show the dharmic path and common origin of Norse, Germanic, Vedic, Greco-Roman, Celtic, Balto-Slavic and Persian beliefs. We also draw parallels to the Proto-Indo-European worldview and the ancient beliefs we call the religion with no name. The Hamia podcast weaves the threads together to understand where we come from and let our true nature empower us in everyday life. We don't have to turn to the east. The answers were always right here. We are all pagan by instinct. Pagans don't pray. We'd never ask for anything. We'd never kneel down for anyone. In our Discord server, we've discussed that we hear things like that quite often on social media. But is it really true? Don't pagans pray? Of course they do. Nothing could be further from the truth that they wouldn't. In fact, the most common form of pagan religious expression is prayer. In this episode, I'll talk about the importance of prayer in our daily spiritual practice and the structure of Indo-European pagan prayer, so you can integrate it into your daily life. Prayer is actually the spiritual expression that we have the most information about. And the most reliable sources on how the ancient pagans prayed are the prayers recorded by the pagans themselves. It's true that the recorded sources of Norse and Germanic prayer are scarce, but we do find them. Birth was seen as extremely dangerous for mother and the newborn. Thus, rites of birth were common in the Germanic societies. In the Viking Age, people would pray to the goddesses Frigg and Freya and sing ritual Galder songs to protect the mother and the child. In Sigdrivomål 3-4, we see prayer to day, night, and the gods in general. In Ynglingasaga, we see how the Swedes anew started praying to Odin. And in Tacitus Germania, we see how the priests of the state offer prayers to the gods before divination. And we also have Frankish testimony that the Saxons prayed before divination. And we also know that the Norse would perform animal sacrifices while talking or praying to the gods. So the scarcity of evidence of Norse and Germanic prayers most likely has to do with the fact that they didn't record much at all, rather than that they didn't pray. In the writings of our other Indo-European ancestors, we find huge numbers of prayers. We have epigraphic evidence from inscriptions on offerings, temples and walls. We have all the epic, tragic and lyric literature written in Greece and Rome. We have inscriptions left by the ancient Celts. And of course, the immense amount of Vedic literature. The 4 Vedas and many other Vedic works are essentially long prayer books. A touching statement of faith from ancient times comes from the Roman practice of vowing to set up an altar when a prayer is answered. Hundreds of these have survived, each inscribed with a prayer of thanks. In Greece, libations were part of everyday life, and libations together with a prayer were often made at home whenever wine was drunk. Each Roman home had a household shrine at which prayers and libations to the family's domestic deities and spirits were offered. And prayer features prominently in the works of Homer. It's in fact Polyphemus' prayer to Poseidon to interfere with Odysseus that's setting the stage for the rest of the Odyssey. So we certainly don't lack information on pagan prayer. But why do we even pray? Well, one thing is for sure. Pagans don't pray just to please a jealous god or out of blind faith. Pagans don't believe in blind faith and external salvation. The gods help those who help themselves. The word prayer itself stems from the Proto-Indo-European root prek, to ask for or to request. And as I've brought up so many times, Indo-European spirituality and life is reciprocal. The rule is a gift for a gift. For those of you who haven't listened to episode 5 on the Gosti principle, I highly recommend you to do so. Indo-European spirituality is reciprocal. The world tree feeds the well with its falling fruit, and in return, the well gives the tree nutrients up through its roots. And Yemo agrees to be sacrificed by his twin brother Manus, so that both land and mankind arises from him. In return, Yemo becomes the first priest and ruler of the death realm, and also becomes an upholder of Dharma. Paganism is an eternal gift-giving cycle. It's in our true nature to want to sacrifice and act selflessly. Through that, we create order and beauty. And it's honorable actions that prolong the branches of the world tree. And in return, we get blessings and gifts with which we can create even more order and beauty. If we take an ancient Greek view, the reciprocity of the gods is based on eros, the power of attraction to the beautiful. When we move closer to the gods, by our attraction to their beauty and goodness, they respond and move closer to us. There then follows a glorious interaction in which Eros flows back and forth between gods and mortals. Let's assume you've been invited to a wonderful wedding, the best trip of your life, or have been given the most meaningful gift you've ever had. Do you call those people or write a thank you card to show your appreciation? Or do you just assume they know you're thankful? Do you return gifts and birthday party and restaurant invitations? Or do you just let things end there? You see, our ancestors wanted to be indebted to each other, because that meant that the gift-giving cycle would continue. All sacrifices and offerings required an accompanying prayer to be effective. Pliny the Elder declared that a sacrifice without prayer is thought to be useless and not a proper consultation of the gods. A prayer and offering is an act of completion. So many things come to us from the gods. And if we just keep them, the flow ends there. By holding tightly to the gifts of the gods, we create an interruption in the natural rhythm of the world, a dead end into which the universe flows and then stops. And Chartus doesn't allow things to end. It doesn't allow its branches to stop growing. It feeds off of our actions. And our gods aren't jealous and watching every step we take or keep track of everything we do or think. They're busy upholding important forces of nature. They are doing us all big favors. And they have to be invited into our lives. We should give them a call and tell them how much we've missed them, how wonderful we think they are. And while we're at it, maybe ask for a favor or thank them for favors done. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Both prayers and offerings present gifts to the gods, so that we can ask for blessings like growth, fertility, and prosperity. So this is why we pray. The gods are neither omnipresent or omniscient. The gods have a quote-unquote life of their own, upholding every potential function and phenomenon in all of the universe. They work with this every second, and they don't think of us all the time. Therefore, the gods have to be invited into our lives through prayer, hospitality, gift-giving, and reciprocity. We have to give to be given, do ut des, as the Romans put it. They also had the expression quid pro quo, this for that. In this case, you have to give prayers and offerings to invite the gods to honor you with their presence and blessings. Indo-European spirituality is personally contractual. You are responsible for being on good terms with the spirits and the gods surrounding you. If you don't honor, respect, and give to them, then there's no reason or incentives for them to do right by you. On the other hand, like I just mentioned, this contract is reciprocal. The gods reward and bless those who strive to live honorable lives and who focus on order and beauty. If we are indeed pagans, then we must live the way Chartus and the gods want us to live. While we are alive, we mustn't be dead ends. We must give freely of what we have, to each other and to the gods. When we pray and make offerings, we tell the gods that we have understood this. So what is prayer, and how do us pagans pray? Well, prayer can be defined as the act of worship by which we call upon the divine to hear and grant our petition. They provide strength and honor for the soul and mental support for both the individual and collective. Everything is interwoven. There's an interplay and communication between everything that has life force. Thoughts and words are two very powerful human tools. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts we make the world, said the latest Buddha. Thoughts are energy, and depending on what kind of energy your thoughts consist of, you'll attract the same kind of energy. And that's one kind of communication. We also know that mantra means vehicle of the mind. So when you utter the real name of something, you tap into that entity's energy. Your mind travels to that energy or force, just like with Galdr. At their simplest, prayers are just talking to the gods, spirits, and ancestors. And like I said before, the gods have their own lives and functions. They need to be invited into our lives for a communicative exchange. You think about them and you talk. but the gods are different from us. Reaching them and talking to them is therefore sometimes a bit different from talking to people. You can show this by using a different style of speech when addressing them. Just as you've set aside time and space for this sacred conversation, you sometimes set aside your normal way of speech to make your prayer special. Ancient paganism had set prayers. The Rig Veda is a collection of prayers that acquired canonical status. And in pagan Rome, following set prayers was so important that an assistant with a prayer book stood next to the priests, whispering the proper words to them. And there is thus definitely a strong pagan tradition of set prayers. It is, however, intention and action that counts. That's superior to orthopraxy. We should remember that 99% of all pagan spirituality has always been domestic and a private affair. In the public spirituality in ancient times, you'd have to follow certain guidelines, and you'd perhaps even have teachers, helpers, priests, and spiritual mentors showing you the right way. While in your home, it was the householder's responsibility to make sure that there was a great bond between the physical and spiritual realm. There never were any rules, dogma, norms, etc. for how to practice in private. It was all about practice makes perfect. In prehistory, every practitioner was his or her own magician who sought contact with and blessings from the divine realm. Divinity wants to be in our lives, because it wants us to do the right things and create order and beauty. Any pagan can compose a prayer and invoke the divine whenever desired. And with some guidelines and handy tricks, we can be more successful in our prayers. So, formal pagan prayer consists of accuracy, purification, creation of sacred space, lighting of the fire, posture, and then the prayer itself consisting of invocation, a historical precedent expressed as a myth, a statement of purpose, the reason the prayer is required, a description of what is to be done, an argument why this is fair and what you're going to do to deserve it, and then often ended with sacrifice and or libation. This might sound like a lot and very advanced. And that's why I said that that's what formal prayer consists of. Prayer can be as simple as just quickly wanting to address gods or spirits when in need of for showing gratitude. But I'll walk you through the steps so that you know the foundation stones. And then you make it as simple or advanced as you wish, and how solemn you want the occasion to be. Some situations deserve more effort and attention than others. One thing is for sure, and that is that pagan prayer has the same primary goal as other forms of good communication: accuracy. What exactly am I trying to convey? To whom? And am I precise and clear enough to reach my audience? Determine whether the deity you are to supplicate is primarily celestial, aquatic, or chthonic. If celestial, normally a ritual fire should be lit and your words travel with the heat from it. If aquatic, normally prayers are done by a body of water. If chthonic, you should stay grounded and pour a libation in the ground while praying. Since prayer is communication with a divine being, and since pagans are polytheistic, pagan prayers must first and foremost identify the being to whom they are addressed. So before you do anything at all, make sure you know the message you want to get through and to whom. Again, this might be a bit over the top for a regular prayer, but I just want to inform how our ancestors did, and you use this information however you want. The gods will listen even in your home with invocations and the right focal points, but more on that soon. Now, all Indo-European peoples have always been obsessed with purification in connection with ritual and prayer. We could hear the ancient Greeks saying things like, having traversed the virtuous path towards Olympus, enter, stranger, enter, without fear if you're arriving pure. But if you're carrying blame, leave the blameless temple. Go wherever you want, but stay away from the temenos of Pallas. And he who goes inside the sweet-smelling temple must be pure. Pure not only by bathing, but also in mind. And now I hear the Facebook Vikings screaming, not the Norse, not the Germanic peoples. They were badass and just went straight on with their hardcore rituals. Then I can enlighten you with the little fact that for the Norse settlers in Iceland, it wasn't even allowed to look at the holy spot of assembly for prayer and ritual without being physically and spiritually purified. And they, of course, came from somewhere. They brought with them the customs and traditions of continental Germanic peoples. Norsemen were actually known in big parts of Europe for their cleanliness and for taking hygiene very seriously. Vikings were also known for bathing much, much more than other Europeans. Vedic, Greek, Roman, Celts, Norse. Purification was crucial to them all. Already the Proto-Indo-Europeans were very careful with it. And the most common form of preparation before prayer and ritual is purification. We live very clean lives nowadays compared to just 70, 80 years ago. But even though we might have more hand soap these days, we still attract contamination from our surroundings, spiritual contamination, etc. Of course, everyday prayer can be done without any advanced purification, but we know that the gods want order and beauty. So when we want to approach the gods in a solemn and ceremonial way, for example, when we feel that we really need help, then we should definitely first clean up. You would, for example, never see Shintoists pray to the kami without first having washed. Think of prayer as meeting honored guests. You would, of course, show them respect. So before praying, make sure you wear nice clean clothes, wash your hands, mouth and forehead, preferably with holy water, such as the Greek kernips. And now I hear the Facebook Vikings again thinking about holy water. But no, the Abrahamics didn't even invent holy water. That was used already 8,000 to 9,000 years ago. For those interested in how to prepare holy water or lustral water, write to me on Instagram or join our Discord server. Now, clear your mind from all the stress and everyday obsessions and set them toward the gods or spirits. Meet them with positive thoughts. Many pagan peoples did also cover their head when praying, for example with white cloth. If we once again hear the Facebook Vikings, then we can remind them that even the utiseta was always performed with a cloaked or veiled head. This is absolutely not necessary, but for some it might have a positive effect, since you screen off a bit and focus your mind on the divine. But I'd say wearing clean clothes and washing your hands and mouth is a bare minimum before prayer. The next step is sacred space. Sacred space is one of the cornerstones of all of Indo-European spirituality. This is a huge topic which I'll cover in a separate episode. I'm sure you've seen Greek and Roman temples. There is actually not the temple itself that is the sacred space, but the walls or enclosure around it. Already the Proto-Indo-Europeans marked out a rectangular space wherever they came on the steppe, and it was consecrated by the chieftain. This was a place the divine took as its abode for the people to benefit from. Only those inside this enclosure took part of the blessings. But your home is automatically sacred space. So if you're home, you don't have to think about that. But if you're out praying or making a ritual out in nature, it's wise to mark out a rectangle around you, a space where you know the gods are present. Sacred space is subject for a full episode of its own, so here I'll assume that you're at home and don't have to think about that. Now, fire is also central in Indo-European paganism. It is the very symbol of the divine and your own part in that divinity. After all, the gods are connected to light. The presence of light is the presence of the gods. Fire is warmth, and warmth is life. In the presence of the gods, we feel alive. Fire is also a means of giving prayer. Our words go through the flames to the gods. They travel with the light and heat, and through the fire they are transformed into spiritual offerings. So pray by the fire, albeit only with a lit candle. It makes a big difference. When it comes to posture, you of course decide what feels right for you. Here it can be of value, though, to repeat that with prayers to celestial, aquatic or chthonic beings, you might want to look to the skies, the body of water, or looking a bit more down to the ground. You can also point your palms toward the target of your communication. You also want to try to face the east when praying, not because of the black stone, but because east is the direction of dawn, where light begins. The holy gods are the shining ones, those of daylight. So when we look towards the light, we look towards them. This is the light of Eostre. In most pagan prayer, the posture of the worshipper is a standing position, with the elbows close to the sides and with the hands outstretched sideways. It should preferably be made with open palms, both hands or the right hand only. And now that you have accuracy in who you aim to communicate with, you've purified yourself, you're in the sacred space, you've lit the fire to help your words travel to the right place, and you have the right posture. Now it's time to commence your prayer. And you do that by calling upon the deity or spirit you've decided to communicate with. Like I said, the gods are busy taking care of their crucial functions in this world, so you have to let them know that you want their attention, because you have something important to say. You have to invite them into your life and your sacred space. And you do that with an invocation. An invocation is an address to the deity, a way to prepare ourselves to receive the deity, to set up a relationship through which the gods may come to us. We're calling out their name. to invoke them and introduce the prayer. It is our custom in prayer to call the gods by the names and places which they prefer, says Plato. So name your deity early in the prayer, preferably first. If you like, mention its titles and link it to some of its myths. Some people also use so-called kennings here, since it compresses a whole myth into one or a few words. You should do as much as you can to honor your deity. It also puts you into a proper relationship with your deity. The gods are more powerful than us, more glorious, possessing more wisdom, and this should be recognized. It can also be a good idea to invoke one of the gods' specific functions or epithets, like Apollon Phoebus. You can also expand your identification by bringing up past favors, given either to you or to others. Remind the god of your prior relationship. Indra, who slew the serpent, whose Vajra has been ever my aid, who has been my steadfast companion. And if you don't yet have a relation to the god, this is a golden opportunity to introduce yourself. Then comes the petition, a statement of purpose and the reason the prayer is required. Like, we've broken the divine laws, or we have violated familial obligations, or just as simple as, I am weak from my transgression and ask for healing, or I'm in need of aid because, or this has happened, so now I need. Here you can also give some context and describe the situation a bit. After all, this is communication. And then a description of what is to be done and an argument why this is fair and what you're gonna do to deserve it. Again, remember that Indo-European spirituality is reciprocal and contractual. You have to blota to bidya, as the Norse would have said. When we ask for something, we always have to give something in return. I ask for this, and if you do that for me, I promise to. If I am granted this, then I'll. If we are indeed Indo-European pagans, then we recognize that there's an ongoing and eternal gift-giving cycle in life and the universe. So here you can give a promise of future praise and prayers, to give a votive offering, to promise to set up an altar to the honor of the god, or promise to make an effort of some other sort. Chartus and the gods love order and beauty, so promise to make an honorable contribution of some sort. Pagan prayers are very often ended by giving a sacrifice and or a libation. Making offerings is praying with an object. Prayers can also be made together with dance, music, and gestures. Some of our ancestors even visualized and manifested their prayers on metal votive tablets, like we often see from Rome. But it's absolutely not necessarily, of course. Words in themselves are gifts. They too have energy, effort, and praise. The Indo-European gods and spirits aren't always there. They have important lives, roles, duties, and functions of their own. They're upholding order. Some might watch over us and the place we live, but most often they need to be invited into our lives. We pray because we want connection with life, nature, the divine, and ourselves. We pray because we need guidance and growth. We pray because it's wise to do so. After all, there's so much around us that's much wiser, more experienced, and more powerful than we are. But we don't just pray to get things. We also pray because we are generous and because we understand that without the eternal reciprocal gift-giving cycle, everything would have stopped, and we can't allow that. We pray because that it's also to create order and beauty, and that is what the Chartus feeds off of. In our prayers, we promise that if you do this for me, I'll do that for you. Indo-European spirituality is a contractual and reciprocal connection with our surroundings. It is a promise that we have to blota, to bidya. Pagans don't need blind faith. The divine and the deity you're worshipping within paganism isn't greedy or jealous. Your duty is not to please the divine or the god for the sake of its greed or desire for worship. Your task is to give to actually receive something back. Your duty as a person is to create order and beauty in this world and to maintain good health and prosperity for yourself, your family, your village, and your city. By praying, sacrificing, and doing honorable things in the name of the God, you will receive gifts back: fertility, success, prosperity, a healthy family and kin, etc. With these gifts, you then give even more back to yourself, the community, and to the divine. You bring order and beauty, and you will receive gifts back to do it even more magnificently. This is the eternal cycle of Indo-European reciprocity. You're doing it because that's the way of maintaining divine life itself and your part in it. This is what Haminga is: honor. And as always, the divine in me bows to the divine in you. I want to thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe so you increase your Haminga straight away. You will find more information about the podcast and the foundation on haminga.foundation. You will also find us on Instagram, Discord, and YouTube, and more platforms will follow. Feel free to contact us if you have questions, requests, or need guidance. I hope to hear from you soon and that you'll tune in next time. And until then, seek not the religion of your ancestors. Seek what your ancestors sought.